Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Robin, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm happy to be here.
I was so delighted to have this conversation with you this morning and to find out all about you and what you've been up to and what you're doing right now. So will you start by telling us about the first job you ever had as a young person?
So my first job was actually as a babysitter. I was 11 years old and I babysat the children across the street. My mom was at home the whole time. So if I needed her, I could call her. And I did, on my very first job, learn how to change a diaper. So I did have to call her for assistance with that. Then when I was 14, I got my first, paycheck job, I guess you might say, working at Baskin Robbins, scooping ice cream for folks. Then I've worked, before I worked as a tutor. I worked in an industrial hardware store. I worked in a paper pulley plant. A variety. I even mowed lawns at one point. My brother had mowed some lawns and then he went off to college and couldn't do it anymore. So I took over for a couple of summers, his jobs, just to kind of earn some money. I wanted to buy a bicycle, I think was, was one of those things. And then my first job after college, my first real job was as a travel agent. And so that was a very exciting job. Sorry, my cat has interrupted here.
Oh, no, that's wonderful. We love to see cats.
Oh my goodness, she will be here. So that was my first job after college with a paycheck where I actually had my own apartment, had to pay for everything. And then I took another job as a travel agent and moved to go to that job, and then was transferred, actually because it was a corporate travel agency, was transferred from Chicago to South Carolina and worked there, and then decided to go to law school. So had, different clerkships and different jobs in law school, and then worked as an attorney. And then we moved to Tennessee, which is where I had grown up, not far from where I'd grown up. And now, and for during that time, I'd always wanted to be a mediator too. I could just never take the time. You had to take a week off from work, and it just didn't work out. So when I moved here, I said, I really want to be a mediator. And so that's what I did not get my law license. I did not transfer that here. So I do work as a mediator here and have been I'm trained in family. I'm trained in domestic violence for family, and then I'm trained in civil here. So
why being a travel agent? What did you major in, hospitality in undergraduate?
No, I was a French major.
Okay.
And my options were either to become, I could either teach it, which, I did tutor, but and I enjoyed that. I had sometimes classrooms of students. And then, but I just didn't think I wanted to do that. I took 8 years of French, and, I don't know why I thought I could do something. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll be a diplomat, or maybe I'll do this, or maybe I'll do that. And I love travel. And the whole reason actually that I was transferred to South Carolina was because I spoke French. The account that we had was the Michelin account. And at the time they said, do you have a French speaker on staff? I was in Chicago, and for a little while they let me call France from Chicago. But then they said, we really want that person to be in South Carolina because that's where their North American headquarters is in Greenville, South Carolina. So they transferred, the company I was working for transferred me, which was a big shock. I'd never even been to South Carolina before. And then I ended up there for about 30 years. Life.
So what was it like working in that corporate environment?
Well, it was exciting at times. I learned an awful lot, right? You learn when you're a travel agent, and corporate travel agent is a little different than leisure, but we did do some leisure things too. People call, if we had a corporate client, they would call and say, "Hey, um, I know you do the bookings for our work travel, but could you make any recommendations for us? I want to take my family to the beach, or I want to, whatever it is." So we would do some of that as well. Um, I did presentations. I learned how to, I was not a public speaker at all. I was just horribly shy and terrified of public speaking, honestly. That's a lot different now, but back then, and I had kind of a mentor in I had an account. I had one of the major account, right? So the major account, and the person there was a mentor to me, and she liked me, and we, talked frequently, because that was part of the job too, was she was the liaison, and so we had to do a lot of troubleshooting. When you have big accounts and something goes wrong, you have an executive traveling or something like that, their neck is on the line, our neck is on the line, everybody's neck is on the line. And so you have to really learn to troubleshoot,
Mhm.
and to also talk to anybody, and not let your emotions, because you're panicking inside, right? You're the president of the company is, has been moved out of first class or whatever. I mean, it wasn't like major, but sometimes it would be just, or they booked them on the wrong flight, or, something. Sometimes it wasn't me doing the booking, and it was somebody else doing the booking, but then I had to learn how to kind of work with that and troubleshoot, and maintain composure, because if you get angry or panicked, or if your voice starts to elevate, people around you kind of feel that too.
Mm.
So the first thing is to kind of breathe. you know so some of that, I've it's funny, because I've learned, oh, the techniques I did were just things that really people do to recompose, if you will. You learn to breathe, you learn to pause.
Mm.
You don't blurt out something if you can help it. You kind of process it if you can. That doesn't come naturally to me. I'm a blurter. And so I've had to learn to kind of pause.
Mhm.
And that's also helpful in law. It's helpful in mediation too, to pause. You don't have to respond right away. And you want to listen. You want to find out, what is the heart of the problem here? Is
Mm.
it that, that they're not going to make a specific meeting? Is there a different, what are some options that we have? What are the options? Let's take a broad look at the options that we have here.
Mm.
Um, and that's been a helpful, I don't know, that's a helpful tool, I guess,
Mhm.
in your tool skill box, that you have your toolbox, that you can kind of use in any event that's going on. It's just take a moment, reassess. It's not the end of the world. Nobody's going to die. However, you do want to see if you can make it right.
Those creative thinking skills, that troubleshooting, the ability to do that is, we think about, okay, I'm just doing it in this one arena, right? So I am helping this person get on their flight or get a new hotel room or whatever it might
Right.
be. And the ability to be present and focused and not be overwhelmed by, what is this person thinking about me and my job performance, or I didn't do this, but I have to clean it up, whatever might be going on
Right.
inside,
Right.
right? To
Yeah.
set that aside and be present and look around, as you said, that skill, it's so amazing how being a travel agent and doing that has transferred through your life, right? I mean, those are,
Mhm.
when we think about transferable skills, we think travel agent to lawyer or travel agent to mediator.
Right.
How do those work? But that's what I love about talking about people and their careers. And you see these basic sorts of skills of being able to think on your feet and emotional regulation and the pause to be with that other person and deal with the situation as presented to get to
Mhm.
the next. Um, yeah, what a wonderful ability that you learned. So you had a mentor that helped you with some of this. What kinds of
Yeah,
things did she do?
Well, she took me to now it just went out of my brain. I had it a second ago. The is it Toastmasters International, I think
Mhm.
is what it was called. And she was a member of Toastmasters, and she said, you're speaking in front of the groups. I noticed because my breathing would get, I'd look out, I would see 40 people and I would freak out. And I thought, and she said, one, you know more about the topic than anybody else in this room, right? You're presenting on this topic, which if you think about it that way, oh, I do. Nobody, I've been studying this topic. This is my job. This is my whatever, whatever skill. If you're speaking about something, if somebody's asked you to speak, chances are you know that
Mhm.
topic. And so, but I still had that shallow breathing. I would break out in a cold, that cold panic sweat that you get. And so she said, why don't you come with me to this Toastmasters International? And so I did. And the first time, all I had to do was introduce myself. But I was freaking out about even I mean, this is how, and I don't know why, but I was freaking out about it. It's in it, and it's maybe a room of, I don't know, 15, 20. It wasn't a big, and we were sitting around a table, right? I wasn't at the front of the room. I wasn't presenting, but I was still getting that cold sweat about introducing myself. And you had to introduce, what is your name? And tell us one, I don't remember what it was, a little icebreaker thing about you, right? Where tell us your favorite hobby, or what's the craziest thing you ever did, or something like that. And so, but I'm like, oh, and it's going around the room, and then it gets to me and I say it. So, and I lived, it's one of those things that you kind of just have to check off and say, okay, this is okay. And then the next time I went, I had to prepare, I don't know if it was 1 minute or 3 minute topic, a speech on. I mean, it was any topic I wanted to talk on. They didn't assign it at that point. I don't know. Maybe later on, I did get some assignments but they had, and they had different levels of folks, right? Different levels of speakers. So some people had been coming for 10 years, and they could get up and they would do great, and they were presenting on maybe a topic that they had to present on in front of an audience of 1,000 or what, however big it was. And so they wanted to make sure that it was natural flow and that they didn't stumble, all of these things. They wanted to practice, which again, that's another skill, right? Practice. Um, and, so that was one of the first things that she did. And she just, if I had, we became very good friends. I was 25, 26. She was 50 something. So she was older. She'd done a lot of these things. So we could talk. She would just kind of walk me through a lot of things and talk me through a lot of things. She's since passed away, which I'm very sad about, but she was critical for that. And honestly, she wasn't the only mentor, right? We don't get through life with just having one mentor. We pick up things, and you also watch other people, and kind of pull from what they do, say, some of the advice. I did have, of course, I was working in a company, so they had, I had people I reported to, and so I learned management. I learned, kind of being proactive instead of reactive, if you can. I mean, that's not always possible in any environment. You have to, oh, well, I didn't know that particular set of facts, so now I have to absorb that. I was preparing on this trajectory, and now you've told me this, which completely changes it. And so you do, like, to your point earlier, you do learn to think on your feet,
Mhm.
but you also learn to take that pause. Um, my husband waited tables, and one of the things that he always says is slow down, because when he had a big party at a table, you start to panic because you need to, oh, I need to get water to everybody, I need to do. But the more you start to panic, the less well, that, they have all these physiological, you can go and study all this, but you start to panic, your level rises, and it hits other people that way too.
Yeah.
And it was funny because those were some of the things that I was learning in a different trajectory than he was at the time. But he's talked about that you just need to slow down and just come to the table with a calm demeanor. Would you like water? Just certain things instead of like splashing the water all over the table and
Right.
knocking into somebody else as they're grabbing their water or whatever. So it can be used in some of these skills can be just transferred to any part of your life too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about public speaking, and that's a skill that we all need. And it is interesting that, that's one of the things that people fear the most is talking in
Mm-hmm.
front of other people. And
Mm-hmm.
I love your example of, first of all, your mentor recognizing that this is a skill that
Yes.
you needed, and then bringing you to a great place and
Right.
opportunity to
Right.
develop that. But as you were talking about the fear of introducing yourself. And I was thinking about your experience, and I don't have a problem public speaking because I taught forever so long, and you're talking in front of students who most of them didn't really care what I had to say because I was teaching philosophy to people who didn't care about it. But I think, oh, I know how to deliver, I know how to talk in front of people, but I was reminded of this was, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. I went to a conference in the summer about Ethics Bowl, which is something that I have been involved with this organization. And for some reason, I kind of felt like an imposter there. Like, I'm a coach to this high
Mm-hmm.
school team. Should I
Mm-hmm.
really be there? And we were going around introducing ourselves in this room of about 30, 40 people. And I got so self-conscious. And I said, hello, my name is Mary Hill. My maiden name. At that time, I had been married for like 20 years.
Yeah.
I said, no, I mean, Mary Brown. And then I was so flustered, and I'm like, the cold sweat, I was breaking out. And I'm thinking, what is going on? And I recognize this lack of confidence, but
Mm-hmm.
developing confidence. So, you might be listening to this and think, oh, I don't need to public speak in whatever I'm doing, therefore I don't need to develop that skill. But anything that we can do to develop personal confidence is
Mm-hmm.
going to help us in our work life, in particular when conflicts come up, right? If we need to have a difficult conversation, if we haven't done the necessary work to develop the right kind of conflict competencies, but that's a lot of it is confidence that, like when you're giving a speech and you
Mm-hmm.
do know what you're talking about, you're bringing that to mind. These people don't know about what I have to say, and I do know more about this particular subject. And so when it comes to conflict, I know more than anybody else how this is impacting me, right?
Right.
And so developing, taking those opportunities and work to develop the confidence can just develop self-confidence can bloom in so many different ways in your professional and of course private life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And one thing I failed to mention there as well is you also learn that it's okay not to know everything at
Yes.
that moment, because while you can be an expert on a specific part of it, somebody may ask a question, a legitimate. I mean, I'm not saying there are some people who might try to ask a question to stump the speaker kind of thing. There may be some of those, but I really think that sometimes people just ask a question and it's okay not to know the answer that time, right?
Yeah.
Now, I always ask the person if it's okay if I write down what your question. Is it okay if and if you'll speak to me afterwards so I can get your contact information and we can follow up on that.
Mhm.
And then that also, and it may be that there's not an answer. I have not had no answer, but I've had maybe what I consider an incomplete answer after I've
Mhm.
researched it. But the fact that you're making that contact and you're following up, and the next time the answer, because you do keep I kind of keep notes after I do something like that. Um, it lets you, that also builds confidence because nobody knows everything, right? Nobody. You can have brilliant friends and brilliant family, and you can stump them every now and then, or they may know something that's you could ask a question about like what makes you nervous, right? their answer is going to be much different than my answer. And particularly at different ages, because like I said, public speaking terrified me in my, even in, I mean, I remember in college having to give it, and I almost had an out of body experience with that. It was just, I got through it. But it was terrifying. Now I mean, I'm not going to say I don't get nervous, because that would be a lie. And I don't want to do misleading, but it's not the same panic that goes into it that I mean, I would just almost freeze with that. And you just have to kind of, okay, we're going to get through this. Now, if somebody asked me to sing in public or something like that, then yeah, I'd be terrified. I'd have stage fright for sure, stage fright for sure.
In our whether we're public speaking or we're just working with others, we definitely want to come across as competent, and sometimes we mistake that for knowing everything. And actual competence is knowing what you know, but remaining open and curious, and proper pride, right? Proper pride is knowing what you know and knowing what you don't. So that, that actually builds relationships when you say, oh, that's a great question. I haven't thought of it that way, or I'm not quite so sure. Let me get back to you. And sometimes the answer is, I looked into it and I'm still unsure, but these are the options available, continuing that conversation. But that also does take a level of confidence to be able to assess when you know and when you don't know, instead of just, because
oh yeah, I know how to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that and that's an authenticity too, that people know. I don't want to say they always know, but often they can tell if somebody's telling them the truth or lying to them. And you don't want to be known as somebody, well, they don't even talk to them because they're inauthentic. Or they lie or something. That just, if you say, I honestly don't know, but I can look it up. I mean, if anybody gets mad at that, then that's really more on them, at that point. And that is also something that has helped me in mediation, is because people come to mediation with a problem, right? They're not coming to mediation because everything's hunky-dory. Right. They come because they have a problem. Sometimes those problems, I can say, okay, well, this is how this is, they'll say, well, what do you think? And that's not my job to tell them what I think, right? But I say, well, why don't we brainstorm some ideas, some options, that kind of thing. Sometimes they bring something that is, this is the first time I've ever heard anything like this. And we can brainstorm together. Tell me what you've because they're trying to figure out some problem solution to the problem. And so we sometimes you have to be creative, and that's going to be brainstorming. Well, I've worked with something that pulls from here and something that pulls from here, but again, they're trusting you with their problem, right? They're coming to seek you out because they have something that they just can't move past. And sometimes the answer is, we can't move past this. That's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can just kind of say, okay, well, let's brainstorm for a while. What are some options? What have you tried? What hasn't worked? What has anything changed since you tried that? There are a lot of ways to do that. And sometimes you say, okay, well, let's reconvene. Let's all kind of do some research into this and see what we can come up with. So again, when people are trusting you with something, you want to make sure you are telling them the truth, because you don't have the answers to everything. And as a mediator, we shouldn't.
Absolutely. And that just reminds me of what you were saying, that your husband's advice as the waiter is the pause, right? So a lot of course, mediation, helping others, is being present and really, that active listening, obviously, but that kind of presence of, when we're brainstorming, when do we need to take a pause? When do we need to look for further resources? When do we see that the other person has reached a kind of capacity and they need to take a break? And reading all of that to help move forward. But so many times we want to be seen as competent, and so we have the answer and we rush. Every once in a while, there's a time and a place for rushing when something is dire, right? COVID hits and decisions have to be made. We're talking about public safety. But many things are not that dire. They might be very important and pressing, but sometimes that takes slowing down so that we can get it right instead of rush, and then it's a bottleneck or it can make it worse.
Well, and again, back to, I remember hearing in my mediation, my original mediation training and subsequent ones too, right? When you're in a panic mode, your whole body physiologically changes, your brain changes, you go into fight or flight or freeze. Is it freeze, fight, or flight? And then maybe one more sometimes. But
Yeah.
you can't, when you think about I'm freezing, I want to leave this situation, or I want to fight, and you're trying to come up with a creative idea, that's a very hard time to move into that.
Hmm.
So sometimes that isn't a good time to say, okay, why don't we take a 5 or 10 minute break, or maybe it's time for lunch or something, why don't we reconvene, or maybe reconvene the next day, or, whatever, depending on what your style and what what your schedule, all of that is like, right? Um, but sometimes just everybody go outside for 5 minutes. It's raining, just go out there and listen to the rain for 2 minutes and then come back, or whatever it is. Um, just to get a perspective shift,
Hmm.
because that perspective shift allows us to come back in. And as a mediator, it can allow you to ask a question to perception shift, right?
Hmm.
So that you can come up with you can go and look at your toolbox, or
Right.
some of those questions that, okay, what are some open-ended questions I can ask here? Or what are some things that I can get everybody out of that mindset? To kind of refocus on a different thing. And, we talk about naming the problem. Is sometimes, instead, because it's not the people, it's the problem,
Yeah.
right? There is a problem that is happening between folks. It's not they're bad people. It's that there's
Right.
something that they are unable to move past. And so just getting that shift in perspective, or go watch a cat video, or the funny cat video or funny dog video or whatever, laugh. If you can laugh for a few minutes, that helps. There's all kinds of things to do to kind of get you out of that fight or flight or freeze
Hmm.
mode. Um,
And I think, sometimes when we think about other people's conflict and we think, well, just do this or just do that, or, this person, they're rational. I've seen them work before. They know what to do. It's it's so easy to tell in our own minds what somebody else should do when we are detached and it isn't what we're living through and what we have been going through. And so I say, oh, just do this. I'm working in a situation right now where a variety of voices have voiced frustration at a situation. And they're like, well, why aren't they just doing this? And why aren't they just doing that? Instead of talking to the person, saying, well, this person's really a rational person. So why aren't they behaving the way that the established norms would have them behave? Well, do you see the crisis that they're in right now? They need help, right? So let's provide that help so that they can have a space to brainstorm off of somebody else to help them to de-escalate themselves so that they can make the best decisions to move forward. And so I think we make that mistake of looking at somebody else's situation and answering it from a detached
yeah,
perspective of, again, my preferences, which may have nothing to do with the reality in
right,
which they live.
right, right. No, you're absolutely. You have to be present. You have to not be detached. And you can't say, well, this is what I would do. It's because my reality is very different from your reality, from anybody's reality, right? So we have commonalities. I don't mean it that way, but um, I may be able to just get in my car and go somewhere, whereas somebody else doesn't have a car, or has a disability. They're not able to drive, or they're too young to have a license, or they're too old, to do that, or, whatever it is. And so you really have to start. And that's something that I've learned too. You have to start where the people are. Where is the person right now?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. and you have to be present. You can't be detached.
Because we only solve problems in the concrete particular, this person, this situation, and they're the one who's now going to be living out whatever the solution is, right? And so it's something that they're going to have to take on, and then is it something that can actually be done? So we're talking a lot about mediation, but I want to know how you got here. So why did you
Yeah.
decide to go to law school and leave the world of being a travel agent?
That, that's so complicated, I guess, but it's so easy in some ways too. I loved travel. Like I said, I loved traveling, and I had traveled quite a bit honestly at that time. And so, um, and I saw kind of writing on the wall for travel agents, which is proven not necessarily true, right? But the internet was starting, um, and just different things were happening in the industry itself. Plus, I had just this, I don't know, this little feeling just kind of in the back of my head all the time saying, is this all there is, kind of thing too,
Mhm.
right? Um, and I tried a variety, like I was volunteering all over, doing all kinds of, not strange, but variety of volunteering, right? Just anything from anyway. So I did a bunch of that, and just nothing was kind of bringing me that fulfillment that I felt, this is what I want to do. This is what I see. Um, and then I sat on a jury. It was a week-long trial, if you can imagine. So, luckily my job was an amazing place. They did let me have the week. I didn't have any repercussions for that. Of course, I had the paperwork to prove it and that kind of thing too. But I sat on this fascinating trial for a whole week. And as a juror, I'd never been called for jury service before. And that was about the same time that I met my husband too, who is an attorney. And so it kind of got me thinking about, well, have you ever thought about, in my head, have you ever thought about being a lawyer? And again, I just kind of had never thought about, what do I want my life to be, And so I kind of sat down with some hard thinking. And after that trial, and I thought, after watching the attorneys, no, it's a little bit more complicated than just trial, right? But I didn't know that. I just thought, well, I can do that. That's public speaking. You're speaking to the judge, you're speaking to the jury, and you're making your case, and it's sales. And I had by that time done a little bit of sales and worked in the sales division and all that of the company that I was working with too. I'd done customer service, I'd done frontline, bookings, all that. So I kind of did a variety, which was a great intro to a lot of things, right? And so I just sat down at my kitchen table. I got my little timer out, and I got my little LSAT book, and I timed myself taking the tests. And then I thought, well, I'll just go to law school. So I applied. And at the time, again, I was living in South Carolina. At the time, there was only one law school in the state. A few years later, another law school opened up. But at that time, it was the University of South Carolina. It was fairly reasonable, again, at that time. And I mean, I'm not saying it's not reasonable, but it was very reasonable. And I got in. And so I sold my house. I had bought a house by that time. I was 29 when I bought my house, but 34 when I went to law school, or 30. Well, let me think here. 96. So yeah, 34. So yeah. And entered a whole different world, right? It was not, it was it was really hard. I'm not gonna lie. It was a complete there were all these young, bright people there. They're 21, 22, they're just fresh out of college, and I'm there, and I don't know, I had never thought about law before, really. So I didn't know how to brief a case. I didn't know how to, all these different terms were new to me. But yeah, that's what I did. And I remember people laughing. We were sitting at a kitchen table before I went to law school, and look, I had already gotten in or whatever. And I had a couple of friends say, why do you want to go to law school? And I said, well, I want to help people. And they started laughing. They started help people. What?
Right.
Lawyers don't help people. They make things complicated, that kind of. But I took it to heart, and I do think, yes, there are times where lawyers can make things complicated, but often that's due to some of the issues that are brought to them.
Yeah.
And as when you're trained, you have to kind of look at every option out there, right? So there's a lot of this brainstorming, so you look at a lot of the things, but you also have to look at what are the laws that apply to this, and how have they been applied before? Is there anything in society that has changed that would make this a more palatable, or that could change the way this law went? And so that's where that kind of comes in. But yeah, I think I have been helping people since law school. So yeah, it's anyway, that
What
was
kind
kind of
what
fun.
kind what kind of law did you practice?
Well, when I was first out of law school, I worked for at the time it was called Protection and Advocacy for People with Disabilities. Now it's called Disability Rights of South Carolina, I think is what it's called. So I worked a lot with people who had a variety. I mean, I had clients with all kinds of disabilities, if you will. We had people with autism, people with mental health, people with developmental disabilities, just a variety. And they had issues that ranged from housing to abuse. That was this variety. School, discrimination, housing discrimination, the fact that there may not be curb cuts somewhere, or the door is too small, or whatever it may be, no ramps, to actual physical abuse, restraints, a lot of issues in
Yeah.
institutions, if you will. So yeah, so that was my first job out of law school. And then my second job out of law school was working for the Access to Justice Commission. And I was their first executive director there in South Carolina. And then I moved here. And like I said, I wanted to do mediation, but that hadn't kind of worked out that way. So yeah,
So
that's my trajectory.
you
Yeah.
transitioned into mediation.
Mhm.
Why? Why go in that route instead of staying in the, strictly legal route?
That's a good question. I mean, I learned about a variety of alternative dispute resolution kind of options in law school. They were still kind of up and coming, if you will. They weren't. I think now they're really you see courts, you see communities that are embracing mediation, arbitration, a lot of different kinds of peacemaking. They're restorative justice. There are a lot of different names for what this is. And at the time, it wasn't quite as pervasive. It was out there. But most people either, resolve things on their own, or if they couldn't, they went to court. And that's where, and you're when you're in court, I do think there's an appropriate, right? I'm a lawyer by training. I do think there's an appropriate place to go, there's an appropriate time. And I think a lot of the issues that are in front of judges, I think it would be incredibly hard to be a judge, honestly, to make decisions for people every single day, and life-changing, life-altering decisions. And so with mediation, like I said, it had always, even in law school, I was learning about it, and it was always something I wanted to do. But I also wanted to take a vacation with my family, or something else. So it was like, well, do I take off time to go and get more training, or do I take off to spend time with my family and refresh and restore, and all the things that I needed to do as well? And it just didn't work out for me to do that. So coming here, again, I didn't transfer my law license here. I did think about it at one point, but then I thought, well, do I really want to continue with law? I think there's again, it's appropriate to go. But I also see that there are alternatives. And I had wanted to try my hat, throw my hat in the ring, if you will, for mediation, because I thought a couple of things with mediation. One, people themselves make their own decisions, which I think is empowering to folks. And I see part of my work with access to justice was seeing that the courts are inundated with people coming into the courts, and not just people, but corporations. And, it's just, courts are busy. And if people can learn to do that on their own, make decisions, learn how to do some of these things on their own, or with the help of a facilitated conversation, which is what we're providing, then would that be better? Or it just is an alternative. And honestly, I think of it as a tool in the access to justice toolkit, right?
Right.
You've got a variety of resources out there for folks. And litigation can also be very expensive. If you do not have an attorney and cannot afford an attorney, it is complicated, frustrating, very, very, very hard for most people. It would be hard for me to even represent myself, honestly. I would always want an attorney to do that if I could get that. So, yeah, I see mediation as one of those routes, right? Where you can go and you can say, okay, I can learn how to do this. Hopefully I can learn how to have a conversation with someone, or I can have a conversation with someone. Just because, again, we've hit the spot where we can no longer come up with ideas or brainstorm together. Maybe we're not talking to one another, I get a lot of that where folks, I do primarily parents, right? And they're fighting over kids, and they can't talk to one another. They had a breakdown in their relationship, which caused the split. Sometimes it's a recent split. Sometimes it's ages old, 10, 20, not 20. Well, sometimes it's 20 years that they've been together, and then they've been apart quite a bit. But, sometimes they can navigate a lot of it, but it's just that there's been a change that has interrupted something, and they don't know how to make it right. Maybe one of them moves out, maybe their job moves them out of state. And before they could do a week on, week off, or they could do, the child could choose where they're going, they were living close to one another. It wasn't a big deal, that kind of thing. And then one of them moves out of state because their job says, oh, hey, I'll give you, $20,000 more, and we'll pay moving costs, and we need you here because we're closing this place down, or whatever it is. And they've been there, they've built up seniority. They don't want to leave their child, but they want to take the next opportunity. And so then how do you split that? Okay, I was in my child's life every single day, or I could be. Now what do I do? I don't want to be just a weekend or a whatever. And sometimes it's a place that's, I have parents in New York and Tennessee. I have parents in California and Tennessee, Texas. I also have folks in Alabama, or I have folks in Middle Tennessee and East Tennessee. And sometimes even that, though, is not, you can't just pop in, your child you can't pick them up after school, right? You have to make a big change. So it's, how do we do this where the child can see the parent, whichever parent it is, right? So we talk about it. We talk about, okay, what is important to your child? What's important to you? And we talk about what's important for child rearing in some ways too. So, and of course, my spiel, is a child. There are numerous studies out there, and they say that a child, as long as the child feels supported by both parents, and that they can reach out and communicate with both parents at any time they want, then that's a happy child. Doesn't have to be daily check-ins. It doesn't have to be daily seeing them. I mean, it's nice, that's nice, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be that once a month they go up for a weekend, or they go to all fall breaks and summer breaks, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But it's feeling supported. And I kind of, thankfully I had both my parents. I still have both my parents, and I go to them they're different people. So I reach out, from my mom. She reads books that I usually like, for example. So I'll go to her and ask her for book recommendation. I mean, it's something, I know this is not like supportive kinds of things. My dad likes to read a lot of history books, and that's not necessarily, he doesn't like fiction. So I don't go to him for book recommendations, but I also know that he likes comedies. So I might go to him for a comedy, tell me about a good movie to see or something like that. So, and that's simplification of it, but that you go to your parents for different things. And as a child, as long as they know they can reach out to either parent, it's helpful.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When we think about, these ADR, alternative dispute resolutions, I think a lot of times people obviously don't know about different options, but so many times people either in their professional or personal life feel that they've been harmed or have actually been harmed. And we have this strong need for justice and a strong need to be seen. And so many times people think, well, I'm so clearly in the right here that the judge will just fall in love with myself and my plight and make that other person pay. And so a lot of certainly what I do is mitigating expectations, right? So I hear, first we have to hear what people, their
Yes.
experience and their pain, and then try to help them see, well, this is now the situation that you're in. And so these are some possible, you might want the moon, but that's unrealistic. And these are the reasons why. So what can we do with the reality that we've been given? How can we make the most of it? And there are different sorts of consequences or different kinds of things that we need to consider when we're at work and I feel harmed by a colleague. A lot of times I participate in wish fulfillment, like, oh, they'll be demoted or they'll be fired or they'll be moved or whatever because of this egregious thing they have done or continue to do. And in my work, I hear it from the other party, almost the same thing, just different aspects. And so, as you said in the beginning, sometimes what we really just need to do is to get people in a space to be able to communicate. This is the world that's given to us right now. How can we talk through whatever issue it is and then move forward? Where, of course, when we're in pain, so much we want to live in the past. And so helping people, how do we move forward by not turning a blind eye to the past, because that informs where we are currently, but certainly at work we need to move forward because we are still working together. And so how can we do that in a way that is fruitful? And when I think about, work, it's certainly, of course, different than parents who are divorcing because of the children and the kind of, you have these very important parties, the children, right? But in a work environment, you have colleagues. And so when you have two or more people who are in a unmanaged conflict, it affects everybody. The whole community suffers.
For sure. Yeah.
Just like the whole community benefits when people are present and engaged and working at a high level.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to, I think the similarities between family and workplace is the fact that you do have to have a relationship. You have to have an ongoing relationship, right? When you're a parent, you're going to be that child's parent, not just for the remainder until they're 18, and then you're no longer their parent. You're going to be their parent, hopefully, for a really, really long time, right? You're going to be out there and you're going to be celebrating their graduations, their marriages or birth of a child or whatever, all of their life that's going on, their first job, their first firing from a job, if that's what it is, whatever it may be, a lot of firsts. And generally speaking, the two parents are going to be there, as the parents. Maybe not exactly at the same time. When the first child, they may say, okay, are you going this day? I'll go the next day or whatever. But you still have to be there for that grandchild now or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And in a workplace, like you said, very rarely is it going to be, well, they're going to be fired because of this behavior, right? It can happen. I mean,
Yeah.
they may be,
Right.
but generally speaking, it's more of, well, you're disrupting the team or the department or whatever's going on here today. And you both are valued employees. We want to keep you here. So how do we get past this? How do we not just get past, but how do we explore what happened? Was it a misunderstanding? What was said exactly? What was heard exactly? And kind of we can talk about what happened. And then how do we avoid doing whatever was said or done in the past? And then how do we also move forward so that the team can also heal?
Mhm.
And everybody here can heal. And is it that we put parameters on what's said? Do we put parameters on after work activities that are discussed in the work? Because it can be something as simple as, well, you didn't invite me to lunch. You invited everybody else, but not me.
Yeah.
It's hurt. It's hurt.
Yeah.
We as humans don't like to be left out. We don't like to be singled out. We don't like, whatever it is. Did you say something in a meeting that I took offense to? Was it, or that you didn't invite me to do something or whatever it was, or is it that when I said that I have an allergy and you laughed about it or said nobody is allergic to eggs or I don't know, but
Right.
whatever it may be, what precipitated that? Okay. So are there parameters that we can talk about that can keep that from occurring again? And are they reasonable?
Mhm.
Because you can't well, you can never talk about eggs again,
Right.
whatever it is, right? Or you can never go to lunch with just Judy and Tom. You have to take Mikey every time, whatever it is. So, what's reasonable.
Yeah.
Um, and it does have to kind of come from them, because
Yes.
it's so much easier to do something when you choose to do it than when you're told to do it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
So again, we're talking about conflicts in this, sort of abstract, which is easy to do. So can you tell
yes.
us about a conflict you've had at work and how you dealt with it?
Oh, there's so many. No, okay. No, I think sometimes you have yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk specifics, but I mean, in every job you have um maybe a nemesis, if you will, somebody who seemingly is obstructing all your progress. And it can be a boss, it can be a coworker, it could be somebody in the mailroom who never gets you the stuff on time or whatever, whatever it is. Um, and I've had pretty much all of all experiences like that. It's harder, I think, when you have a boss that is doing something that doesn't necessarily uh, help you.
Mhm.
I guess is maybe obstructing. That one's a trickier one, and I've had a few of those. Sometimes I try to confront, but not in a uh, not in a combative way, but
Mhm.
maybe say, uh, I found that to be a little bit, and I do remember one time, being a woman, you sometimes, if you have a male boss, right, um, sometimes they say something inadvertent, and I really do think it was inadvertent. I don't think it was meant to be um, sexist, and um, and I did stand up for myself. And you talk about this cold sweats and this was much worse than public speaking because I was
Mhm.
I could lose my job.
Mhm.
B, I want to make sure I'm not just blurting. I'm a blurter. I don't want to go in and blurt it out going, well, that was incredibly sexist. So, yeah, I said, I don't know that you would say the same thing to a male coworker. And, and I, I saw the kind of like, I saw a jerk back, which I was, like, whoa. And, I got a little, not gonna lie, I got nervous. And, but in the end, it did change. It did, at least around me. I can't guarantee it changed for everybody, but it did for me. And so that was a hard one. Coworker, that just again, I am an avoider probably originally too. That was my technique. I wanted to just let it go on for a long time. But I have learned, and that it is better to go ahead and just say, not blurt, but think about really what is the best way to say this, and say something, and to not be too vague, when you're saying, if there's something that is happening that is affecting negatively affecting, then you have to go ahead and say, this is negatively affecting me, or can I help you get to the next spot where, is there something that is going on that is causing a problem there?
And I like how
go ahead.
I was just saying, I just like how you said this is negatively affecting me, instead of you're doing this thing and you're problematic, right? I mean, just even that this is something that is happening for me or to me. And then as you're going on to say, is there something I could do to help you with this? Or, I mean, that's a very elegant way to talk to a coworker, because I'm talking about me instead of how bad you are.
Right. Well, I've learned, again, you're around for a long time. You learn how to communicate some of these things. And I have learned that I statements are much more effective. I am feeling this way because of this action, not because of you, but because of this particular action. And that is a lot better than going, oh, every time you use the copier, when I've asked everybody, is anybody going to use the copier? And I've got to make 40 copies of something. And then you go up there and you make 20 copies. That puts me behind, and you jerk for doing that. And I called dibs, whatever it may be, whatever, it's the harm. And now I got to stay here till 6 o'clock because I know the copier is going to break down at least once, or what, I mean, we've all been there, right?
Right.
So it's just that kind of thing. If you can say, when I say dibs, or however you word it, when I say I want to do this, I'm saying this because I want to make sure that nobody else is going to impact what's going on with me. This is not going to come back to haunt me and make me stay late. I don't want to stay late to make copies. I want to go home too. I want to eat. I'm hangry. I'm, whatever it is. So it's, but the I statements, it's, and it's the action, because if you say you, that's automatic defense, right? If somebody says you're a terrible blah, 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 instead of, you're a terrible person. What is that? I mean, that's what I'm feeling, maybe, right? That's what I'm feeling. But it's really that you've just done this action that has interrupted what I thought was clear from me. And maybe I need to clarify. Maybe I need to say, I'm about to do this job for 40 people, or maybe I need to change it so I'm not doing it last minute. Maybe there's that, right? If I have to have it the next day, maybe I should do it the day before. And that's something that, you have to also take responsibility, take accountability for my act, because they're doing theirs for 2 days from now. Well, why are you doing yours for 2 days when mine's tomorrow?
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure I'm not doing it at the last minute. Oh, well, maybe I need to take a lesson from that too.
Right.
Then just, maybe I didn't tell you mine's for tomorrow. Maybe I need to be clearer. And my ED right now, she uses this term all the time: clear is kind.
Yeah.
And it's so simple, right? Clear is kind. And it's so true.
Yeah.
And if you're just clear, I need to, okay, I have this tomorrow that I have to have these 40 copies for. Does anybody else need the copier right now? And if not, if you don't have anything urgent, I'm going to go ahead and use it. So please don't use. I think that, that can clear it up right from the beginning.
Mhm. Absolutely. As you know, so much of conflict is due to some kind of miscommunication. It's not the only problem,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But
Right,
a
right.
lot of it is miscommunication. And so it reminds me of that when there's a problem at work, we send a memo to everybody, but it's just really Ted. So Ted never understands the message. We need to go talk to him. So back to your boss, if
Mhm,
you were to say, when you talk that way, I feel uncomfortable. He's like, what way? But it's pretty clear and startling for someone to say, I don't know if you would say that to a male colleague. And that he had a response, which is so human. And then that then you responding to his response, but to leave that pause for the person, right? To
mhm,
process and think instead of assuming, oh, they're going to get all defensive or oh, this, that, or the other. When somebody points out something that you have done that negatively impacts them, we don't have that vision of ourselves because it isn't our intent by and large,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
so we might feel misunderstood or we might feel called out, and that is embarrassing or disheartening. And so that allowing that human interaction space to be clear, but then to also offer the presence, right? It is a gift to be clear to somebody, but then
mhm,
also to stay with them, to allow them to process so that we can move on,
mhm,
right? This is a dialogue instead of venting, right?
mhm.
The
Right.
venting doesn't get us, it usually is more harmful than anything.
Yeah. Right. No, but I mean, I will say though, there is value in having someone you can vent to. And you
Yes.
just, and again, though, you need to say, I am venting. I don't want your input. I don't want you to solve this. I don't want whatever it is. Because especially with our loved ones, we do tend to vent and then they try to fix it. And you're like, no, 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 no. I need to vent.
Right.
And having that trusted person
Yeah.
or group, I mean, honestly, a group of people, because there are different things to vent about
Yeah.
and different people hear it and process it differently. So
Right. And it helps us to process, right? When we hear ourselves
yes,
say it out loud, right? And if we have someone that we vent to who will then ask us probing questions to help us figure out and get clear so we can decide what to do next.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I've also noticed if I'm the person being vented to, um, I don't remember where I read this, but it said you have 3 questions to ask. Do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard?
Mm.
And those 3 questions, because somebody say, I just want to be heard, or
Mhm.
I actually feel like I need a hug, or I need help because I can't get to the next place from this because that hurt me so much. Can you, yeah, I want you to hear me and maybe hug me, but I also want to be helped. I mean, maybe it's all 3.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
it's
great way to think before when somebody is talking to you, what do they need here? And we can always ask.
yeah.
So, Robin, this is my last question I'd like to end with. As you look into the
Okay.
future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only will everyone be treated with dignity and respect, but that they'll be encouraged to thrive and flourish as well?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I mean, we've talked about a lot of it, right? We've
Mhm.
talked about pausing. Um, we've talked about not necessarily having to know it all and admitting when you don't know it. And then I think you said something about being curious early on too, right? Being
Mhm.
curious, um, and maintaining that curiosity, whether for whatever it is. I mean, and if you get to a point like when you're working somewhere too, if you're no longer curious or involved or feel that you can learn something there, then maybe it is time to reassess and go, okay, what is my next step? Um, and then recognizing that you can change your mind, you know, um, and nothing, I think if somebody said, what is your, just life continues to change. And I know people as a rule don't like change, but don't be afraid of it. Don't go into it without doing a risk assessment, but also look to change as something that can help you grow, because there's and I can't think of one right. I have my thesaurus, or I mean not my thesaurus, but my Bartlett's book of quotations. But there's all this, so many quotes out there about change is growth, leads to growth. And it's always darkest before the storm, or it's always darkest before dawn. You've got all these different things that are kind of these ideas that change. Change is not necessarily bad. It can be bad. It can be scary. I guess bad is maybe not the right word, but it can be scary. The unknown is, none of us want to just be blindfolded and take a step forward, right? Because we might fall, might be a step there, might be water, might be a shark. We don't know what we're stepping into. So if you can take that, don't be afraid to necessarily that step forward, but see what you can do to remove the blindfold. What do I need to do? What do I need to assess? What do I need to kind of touch the ground? Do I need to listen to see if I hear sharks there, or somebody cheering because there are sharks there, or is it, I don't know, I'm kind of going off on a weird little tangent there with the sharks there, but at the same time, it's, what can I do to assess? What can I do? People get diagnoses, health diagnoses. All right, well, what do I need to do for that then? Do I need to talk to somebody? Is there a group online that I can chat with? Oh, did my Aunt Susie have this too? Or do I need to do some research into my genetic history? Do I need to talk to neighbors? Do I need, what do I need? Do I need to gather my group around me and say, okay, I got this. I need to cry for a weekend. Can you all come with me and be with me? Or do I need to just take the time to self-reflect? And that's true. I mean, it can be a new job. New jobs are scary, right? Even if you've had jobs. I mean, I've had a lot of jobs, but every time I interview, I'm terrified, right? Again, not to go that cold sweat necessarily, but I'm, what are they going to like me? And it's not even so much like, but it's, are they going to find me acceptable to be the new person? Am I going to put my best foot forward? Am I feeling well today? Am I feeling under the weather? What's going, so, just breathe one day at a time, all these things. Yeah. I know that's a long way to say it, but
no, I really do love that. I mean, change is inevitable. It's just, we're changing right now. We've changed through the course of this conversation. That's just way of life. And a lot of times we're filled with fear because of a particular kind of anticipation, but we don't have to leap into the darkness. We can take educated guesses, but the fact of the matter is the future for all of us is unknown. And so to embrace that is the way of life. That's again about expectations. Things are always going to change. That is the nature of things. So that is both comforting, this too shall pass, and disheartening, this too shall pass. But that is reality.
Right.
Well, Robin, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I did too. Thank you so much for inviting me, Mary. I have to say I was a little nervous. This is my first podcast. So
well, I'm sure not your last.
But it was such a pleasure to do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Robin, thank you so much for being on Conflict Managed. I really enjoyed our conversation. We serve on the same board, TAPM, Tennessee Association for Professional Mediators. And of course, when we are meeting once a month, we're doing business stuff. So it's so lovely to get a chance to talk with you and hear about your stories. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday. And we are now on YouTube. So if you aren't watching this, if you're just listening, come check it out on YouTube. And if you watch on YouTube, you will see a special appearance by Robin's cat, which is wonderful. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. If you haven't had a chance to check out my new book, How to Be Unprofessional at Work, Tips to Ensure Failure, it's 80 tips of what not to do and starts a conversation about what to do instead. And remember, conflict is normal and expected at work, so let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.